Hello, sci-fi adventurers. This is Sonja with the Sci-Fi Adventures channel, here with the next installment of Time Tracks, the next narrated video. I'm really glad you guys could join me, and Mom is here joining us too. She's going to be putting the video together. So
Yep. Hello, everybody.
for everyone who knows my mom, Vicky Summers, she helps out a lot on this channel. Okay, guys, so if you have been following along with the narrated video installments of the story that I have been posting here on YouTube, you might remember that we left off in the last video with the train pulling up at the station and Sophia seeing that TC is the one driving the train. So I'm just going to go ahead and start reading the conclusion of chapter 2, answering the call, and then I'm going to start chapter 3, which I have titled The Intruder. So I hope you guys have your train tickets ready, because here we go. Sophia waved excitedly to TC, who surprised her by waving her onto the front of the train with him. Gasping out loud, she noticed the train's front cab was at least 9 feet off the ground. She craned her neck looking for steps or any other way to board the high cab when she was startled by the loud clanging of a metal ladder. She gasped again as the ladder was slowly lowered down the side of the train and positioned directly in front of her. Anxious about having to climb the ladder, Sophia found herself once again saying another prayer. "Dear God, if you can hear me, please help me climb this ladder." Just then, TC shouted out the "all aboard," and Sophia quickly shoved the train ticket into the front pocket of her anorak jacket. She tied the jacket securely around her waist and took a deep breath before stepping tentatively up onto the first rung of the ladder. She quickly glanced over her shoulder at the train station, and a nervous shiver passed through her at the thought of leaving behind the only life she had ever known. But she was determined to keep going, and she knew in her heart that this was the right path for her. Grabbing onto the sides of the ladder firmly, Sophia started to climb, making sure not to look at the ground and keeping her gaze on each step ahead of her. She continued climbing at a slow but steady pace until, with a sigh of relief, she finally reached the top rung of the ladder. The moment she stepped into the train, she felt exuberant, as though she had just passed a difficult test or reached a personal milestone. TC greeted her right away, smiling broadly. "Welcome aboard, miss." Excited to be on the train, Sophia was shocked when her knees buckled unexpectedly and she lost her balance. She would have fallen for sure if TC had not lunged forward just in time and caught her. "Whoa there, Miss Sophia. I do reckon you've had more than your fair share of excitement for one day." Sophia managed a shaky smile. "Thank you, TC. I think you're right. I must not have realized how dizzy I was, but I'm starting to feel better now." TC held onto her arm protectively and helped her further on into the cab. "I sure am sorry about that climb, Miss Sophia. I wonder if the climbing made you dizzy. Let me know if you need to sit down." Sophia shook her head emphatically. "Oh no, please, not yet, TC. It's wonderful to be here, and I want to look around a little first." TC hesitated a moment before finally waving an arm around the cab's roomy interior. "What do you think of Old Destiny so far, miss?" Sophia stared wide-eyed at all the technical equipment around them, and even though she could not identify most of it, she did recognize a two-way radio, an odd steering wheel that she guessed to be the train's throttle, and a quaint antique oak hand-crank telephone that she found particularly intriguing. The train also had an impressive control panel full of many levers and knobs, and on either side were 2 seats upholstered in a dark red floral fabric. Sophia was immediately captivated by the train's charm and elegance. "Old Destiny is just beautiful, TC. So historic and yet somehow brand new at the same time. Oh, wait, I've got it. Old Destiny is timeless. Sophia paused and then pointed to the old-fashioned telephone. Is that by any chance a real working phone? TC chuckled. Yes, Miss Sophia, that is indeed a real telephone. Sophia blinked in surprise. She had not expected the phone to actually work. Does that mean I could call my parents? TC nodded. Of course, miss. You just say the word. Sophia's heart skipped a beat at the thought. Thank you, TC. I will let you know. She would have loved to call her parents right away, but she hesitated. How was she going to explain what had happened to her when she herself did not yet understand it? Sighing heavily, she decided to wait and call them once she knew more about why she was here and where Old Destiny was going. As she thought about the train's destination, she remembered the train ticket and promptly retrieved it from her jacket. Oh, TC, I'm sorry, the ticket is so wrinkled. TC seemed unconcerned. Oh, don't you worry, miss. The ticket looks just fine to me. Smiling reassuringly, he pointed to the 2 seats in front of the train's control panel. What do you say we sit for a spell, miss? I do need to tend to a few things before we get Old Destiny here moving again. Sophia nodded with relief. She had no idea how far she had actually walked that day, but she was now acutely aware that her feet were aching, and she was more than ready to sit down. She made her way to the passenger seat and sank back into it gratefully, happy to discover that the seat was as comfortable as it looked. TC waited until she was seated before sitting down in the driver's seat. Sophia watched curiously as he opened one of the compartments on the control panel and brought out an insulated lunchbox. He set the lunchbox down on the small built-in table between their seats before speaking. I got to thinking, miss, you surely must have worked up an appetite by now, and we don't want you getting any more dizzy spells either. Sophia smiled gratefully and laughed out loud in agreement. Oh, yes, TC, as a matter of fact, I have. Thank you. TC looked pleased. Would you like to do the honors, miss? Sophia nodded an emphatic yes and began emptying out the lunchbox until the table was filled with food. TC had packed tuna sandwiches, oranges, an assortment of crackers and sharp cheeses, and there was even lemon cake and a canteen of water for her. Sophia did not know if it was all the excitement of the day or because she was so hungry, but she was sure that food had never tasted this good before. TC must have been hungry too, because neither of them spoke much, but instead ate in a companionable silence. Just as Sophia was finishing the last of her sandwich, she looked out the window at the bench where she and Spencer had sat together and wondered what had happened to him. She sincerely hoped that he was happy with his choice. As she looked at the unmanned ticket booth and loudspeaker, she was also struck by the realization that the train station no longer intimidated her. And even though she did not yet know what awaited her, she understood now what it felt like to have a true sense of purpose. She would have continued happily gazing out the window if the image of Spencer fleeing the train station had not suddenly come back to her vividly, and she winced, remembering the expression on his face. Apparently, Spencer fleeing the train station had bothered her more than she realized. She felt a fleeting chill and turned quickly away from the window then, relieved to focus instead on TC, who caught her eye right away and pointed to the digital clock on the control panel. Sophia noted the time and gasped out loud. According to the clock on the train, it was only 2:45. Sophia checked her wristwatch and shook her head in disbelief. Her watch also said 2:45. She was certain that more than 15 minutes had passed. How is this possible, TC? How could only 15 minutes have passed since I first boarded the train? TC's expression became uncharacteristically sober, and he leaned forward to answer her. Well, Miss Sophia, that would be because we are still in the time portal. You see, it's all a bit complicated, miss. Sophia's pulse quickened, and she felt a sudden urgency to know more. Oh, please do go on, TC. Even if I can't understand it all yet, I need to know. TC eased back into his seat. I was hoping you would feel that way, miss. The thing is, This entire region surrounding the train station is a time portal or gate, which means that time here has a tendency to stop and start. Sophia tried unsuccessfully to picture time starting and stopping and thought she had better start with the basics. What exactly is a time portal, TC? TC leaned forward again. Well, miss, I suppose the simplest answer would be to say that time portals connect different locations in space and time. Sophia bit her lip nervously. She was not at all sure she was ready to hear the answer to her next question. Is that what old destiny does then? What I mean is, will we be traveling to a different time? TC's brow furrowed over with concern. You know, miss, this is a lot to take in all at once, and to be honest, I'm not sure how much I ought to be telling you just yet. But I am what is called a time conductor, and my job is to watch over timelines. And when a timeline has been tampered with, well, miss, that is when they send me in to pick up passengers at time portals like this one. Sophia nearly jumped out of her seat. Oh, but wait, TC, if you are here, then that must mean something has gone wrong with my timeline. Suddenly her throat was very dry. Why me, TC? Why was I the one brought here to this time portal? TC spoke slowly as if he were choosing his words carefully. Well, miss, I do get sent to time portals to pick up passengers for time travel or for folks who might be needing to travel to different timelines, and only those who say yes to destiny, like you did, can usually board. But I reckon before I can better answer your question, I need to ask you one first. Sophia's head was whirling with thoughts of time travel, and what did he say? Travel to different timelines? She took a much-needed drink from her canteen and tried to stay calm. What is the question, TC? TC did not answer at first, but instead opened up another compartment on the control panel and brought out a strange mechanical device. Sophia wondered if it might be some kind of tuning fork or antenna, but she really had no idea what it was. TC placed the object carefully on the table between them. I want to say, miss, that I sure do appreciate how concerned you were about the condition of the train ticket, and now I wonder if you might be willing to look after something even more valuable than that gold ticket. Sophia's eyes seemed to be glued to the object. Yes, of course, TC, but what is it? Well, miss, I will try to explain as simply as I can. This device is designed to pinpoint the location of a rift made by the introduction of destructive energy into the space-time fabric of your timeline. The intent, miss, was to create an alternate timeline, and unfortunately, it succeeded. I know this must be hard to take in and most likely not too easy to hear, but the bottom line is that your original timeline was damaged, and an alternate timeline, the timeline you have been living in, was created. Sophia sat bolt upright in her seat as she remembered that moment back at the train station when she had wondered if Daniel and Spencer had both been affected by some outside influence or interference. Her heart beat wildly as she tried to take it all in, and she could not deny that there was still a part of her that did not want to believe that such things as time portals and timelines existed. But the part of her that did believe was more convinced now than ever. So, TC, let me make sure I understand this. You are saying someone deliberately tampered with my timeline in order to create an alternate timeline? TC nodded soberly. Yes, miss. Sophia struggled to digest the awful truth. But why, TC? Why would anyone do such a thing? She thought back to all the times in her life when she had felt out of place, and she had always blamed herself. She shook her head, not wanting it to be true, because if it was true, then not only her life, but the lives of those she loved and cared about had been changed as well. It was too much. Choking back a sob, she could not stop the tears from flowing, and through her haze of grief, TC appeared next to her with a stricken expression, and without a word handed her another lavender-scented handkerchief. She pressed it to her cheeks and breathed in its soothing scent until she was once again, somehow, miraculously comforted. By the time TC had returned to his seat, she was already calmer and more clear-headed, and she did not want TC to think he had made a mistake by telling her about her timeline so soon. Please, TC, I hope you don't regret telling me. I've made my choice, and I have no intention of turning back if that is worrying you. In fact, I'm more determined now than ever to know what I can do to help. Sophia saw the hint of a twinkle return to TC's eyes and was relieved. Well, Miss Sophia, this device has a power that can only be used by someone from the original timeline, but it can do more than just locate the problem. It is a kind of key that can help to repair the timeline as well. Sophia was up again on the edge of her seat. So that is why I was brought here. I belong to the original timeline, and I can use this device or key. Does it have a name? TC nodded. Yes, miss, it has a technical name, but it might be easiest to just call it a rift locator. And if things go as I hope, this key, along with 2 others just like it, will restore your timeline. Okay, guys, and we're going to go on here to Chapter 3. This is the beginning of Chapter 3, which I have titled The Intruder. Sophia shook her head in amazement. How could such an unassuming device repair her timeline? She was about to ask TC to explain how it worked when her attention was suddenly diverted to the view screen in the center of the train's control panel. What do all those lines represent, TC? TC smiled right away as though he had been waiting for her to ask. I thought you might be wondering about those, miss. I like to call them time tracks. Sophia's eyes widened. Time tracks? What do they do? TC pointed to one of the many sets of intersecting lines. Well, Miss Sophia, you see the X and Y axes here represent a Cartesian coordinate. Sophia caught her breath in surprise. She was certain that one of her algebra teachers, Mr. Swanson, had mentioned Cartesian coordinates in class. As she continued to study the lines on the view screen, she suddenly remembered. Cartesian coordinates represented the location of one point relative to another point. Sophia wondered breathlessly if she had come to the right conclusion. TC, are these coordinates by any chance mapping out the addresses of different locations in space and time? What I mean is, are these the coordinates for other time portals, like the one we are in right now? TC looked at her appreciatively. Why, yes, they surely are, Miss Sophia. These lines do indeed represent the coordinates to other time portals. As a matter of fact, they're part of something larger called ley lines that connect the universe much like an energy grid. And when everything's working properly, things go along just fine. But when there is any kind of disruption to a timeline, that is when folks like me get called in. Sophia's mood quickly sobered as she thought about her parents, Daniel, Spencer, and all the other people in her timeline who had no idea their lives had been tampered with. So, TC, do you know who did it? Do you know who caused the damage to my timeline? TC nodded. Well, yes, Miss Sophia. As a matter of fact, I believe I do have a pretty good idea who did it, and if I'm right, he is what we time conductors call a time bandit. A reckless and bad lot for sure, miss. Always manipulating time to their own ends and paying no heed of the consequences to others. Sophia swallowed nervously and reached for her canteen, noting with some alarm that her hand was shaking. What if whoever had brought her to the time portal had made a mistake in choosing her? After all, she had no special skills or abilities that she was aware of, and she certainly did not feel prepared to face any time bandits. For the first time since boarding Old Destiny, Sophia began to question her choice, not because she did not want to see her destiny come to pass, but because she was beginning to doubt now she could actually fulfill it. Sophia had become so absorbed in her thoughts that she nearly jumped out of her seat when TC spoke again. Are you okay, Miss Sophia? Sophia smiled at TC apologetically. I'm sorry, TC. I feel like I'm letting you down, or worse yet, letting myself down. It's just that I seem to be having some doubts now that I can do this. I mean, what if this time bandit comes after us? TC looked at her intently. Miss Sophia, you underestimate yourself. Why, just now you made the connection with no help from me that the Cartesian coordinates are mapping out the locations of other time portals. What you're doing is very brave, miss, and everybody has moments of doubt, and even moments when they might be thinking of turning back. And so to rightly answer your question, if there has to be any confronting to be done, you have my word, miss, you won't be alone. I was going to wait a little while longer before telling you this, but one of the other two who have been chosen from your timeline have also been assigned to be your protector. Sophia sat bolt upright on the edge of her seat. I have someone assigned to be my protector? Oddly enough, she had an idea right away of who it might be. But how? Spencer had all but fled the train station. Is it Spencer, TC? Before TC could answer, they were abruptly interrupted by the loud, high-pitched ringing of an alarm from somewhere inside the train. The sound was unbearably deafening, and Sophia covered her ears before giving TC a pleading look. Lunging forward in his seat, TC reached over to manually shut off one of the switches on the main control panel, and within seconds the alarm mercifully stopped. I'm mighty sorry about that, Miss Sophia. That alarm only goes off when there is an intruder in the time portal. Sophia froze, seized with panic. Is it the time bandit already? TC went over to the window of the high cab and looked out. Sophia could tell right away by his tense reaction that something out of the ordinary was happening. Please, TC, what is it? Her heart was beating so rapidly that she feared she might faint. It did help, though, that TC's voice was amazingly calm as he instructed her. Miss Sophia, I need you to hide the rift locator. Sophia's breathing became labored as an even bigger wave of panic washed over her, but with an effort she pulled herself together. Even though her hands were shaking, she retrieved the device from the built-in table. She then grabbed her jacket and hastily stuffed the device into one of the pockets before putting it on. Slightly out of breath, she miraculously regained her composure just in time before the intruder entered the train. At the sight of him, Sophia had to will herself not to scream. He was a forebodingly gaunt and tall figure wearing a long gray trench coat and a pair of long gray gloves. Sophia thought his attire very odd and unsettling. She noticed a cold, flint-like gleam of indifference in his eyes and shivered. He spoke in a low and raspy tone. Where is it, Flanagan? Momentarily confused, Sophia remembered that TC was a nickname. The figure took a menacing step in their direction, and Sophia caught her breath. Without a word, TC swiftly, as though she were light as a feather, propelled her behind him and reached back protectively with one arm to shield her. Why bother with this charade, Flanagan? You know you're going to lose. This is my timeline now, and I will do with it what I please. Are you not aware that we have Daniel? There are precisely 3 breaches in this timeline, and you're going to need 3 of your devices to repair it, as well as 3 inhabitants from the original timeline. He stopped then and looked pointedly at Sophia. She is here, so I know that at least one of the devices must be here as well. Sophia was horrified. He already knew who she was, and he had kidnapped Daniel. A silent prayer rose up within her then. Please, God, keep Daniel safe. She thrust her hand into the pocket of her jacket and held on to the rift locator tightly. She understood better than ever now just how high the stakes were, and that this horrid man must never get hold of the device. TC finally spoke in an even, controlled tone, and Sophia could not help but marvel at his continued calm under so much pressure. None of the devices are here. You are wasting your time. Sophia cringed as the time bandit's cold eyes flashed with anger. What do you take me for, Flanagan? A fool? Sophia moved in closer to TC, feeling more out of her depth by the moment. You cannot succeed without Daniel, and the other one has given in to fear. What can you and this pitiful girl possibly do? As I said before, you're going to lose. When TC spoke again, there was a sharp edge to his voice that Sophia had not heard before. You best take your leave. You're not welcome here. The intruder took a step backward at his words, but he did not leave right away. Sophia shuddered as his eyes searched the entire interior of the cab slowly and deliberately, and Sophia instinctively knew that he was hoping to spot the rift locator. With her heart thumping wildly in her chest, she clutched the object in her pocket, praying that he would not think of looking in her jacket. After a few more unbearably tense and long moments, and just as Sophia was beginning to wonder if he would ever leave, he finally moved toward the entrance of the cab. Next time we meet, I will not be so tolerant, old man. At his words, an unexplainable gust of wind filled the interior of the cab, and the intruder was gone as though he had vanished into thin air. Okay, and that does include this installment of the Time Track story. I hope you've been enjoying it so far. And I look forward to being back with you again soon here on the Sci-Fi Adventures channel with more of Time Tracks. And until next time, I hope you guys will keep exploring. I know Mom and I will. If you want to say bye to everybody, Mom.
Oh, yeah. Hi. Bye.
Hi and bye. Okay, guys, thanks for joining us. And again, I look forward to being back with you soon with more of Time Tracks.